Okay, so you probably clicked on this because you want to know how to make something realistic, but I want to get into why first. So I made this guy here. I'm a big fan of the Avatar The Last Airbender TV show and Iroh as a character in general, and that's kind of important when you're making any kind of art. You do have to be invested in the source material because Iroh took 2 weeks on and off, I'd say 18 hours total. So 18 hours is a long time. You could distract yourself by watching, say, the TV show at the same time. But I think focus work is more important. And in order to be focused, you have to be at least a little passionate about what you're making. So I'm passionate about Iroh as a character, and that's what allowed me to put in like 18 hours of work, which for a lot of people is a lot of time. That's a lot of time of your life to just put into making a tiny sculpture, or not a tiny, but a fairly small sculpture that you're not even legally allowed to sell. So with Iroh, the focus was trying to make something realistic. The way you do that is with eyes and hair. That's how I do it. That's the best way I've found, because with sculpture you use clay, or you can use any material honestly, but I use clay, and Super Sculpey is excellent for making anatomy, for making faces, hands, bodies, muscles, things like that. But when you get into other textures, there's better things to use. So when you sculpt something, you're trying to replicate textures, especially when you're trying to be realistic. So for example, I have maybe 4 or 5 different textures on me right now. I have hair on my head, beard hair, which is a different texture. I have glasses, eyes, shirt. I have lost count. But anyway, you have a bunch of different textures on you, and if you were to make it all out of clay, it would all look like clay. That's how you stylize something. But let's say you're trying to get away from stylization, and you're trying to get into something that looks really real. Then you have to use different materials for different textures. I'm slowly working my way up to that, but right now I use resin and things like that for the eyes. These I bought on Etsy from Juliana Lapine, so she makes really good resin eyes. I can make my own, but I don't think they're at that level yet. So once they are, I can save some money, but right now I spend it on getting good quality eyes. And if you can, I'd say it's a good way to get into making slightly more realistic sculptures, because it just boosts it in general. It gives a lot of life to something. The other texture I used was the hair. So with Iroh, I used mohair, which has worked on other things, but with Iroh I don't think it worked very well, because on the hair here, let's see if it will focus, but on the hair I can't hide the seam lines, so I glued the hair on. And with another project I made, like a Harry Potter sculpture, I used the black mohair and I hid all of the seam lines in other pieces of hair. You couldn't really tell with the Harry Potter sculpture, but in this case Iroh has a pretty obvious seam line since he doesn't have all his hair, but I'm able to kind of hide it more or less from the front. But that's the thing with a lot of sculpture, any art honestly, your work is on display, so everything you did can be seen, and you can work on trying to hide it. So like for ages I didn't like that you could see my thumbprints in the clay, because to me you can then see how I made it. You can see kind of the sketch lines and things. But in a lot of other art forms, like let's say music, you don't hear the initial attempts and things like that. You don't necessarily register the experiments someone is making, but with sculpture and drawing and things like that, you can see the lines, you can you can tell when something isn't good because you're just looking at it. Your eyes are designed to know when something looks right and doesn't, especially with human faces, because that's what our eyes are for, honestly, is to differentiate human faces and tell their emotion and things like that. So when you're trying to make something real, it's an uphill battle that I've only been able to have some success with in varying the textures and using good paints. So this is where we get into painting, which gives life to your sculpture in general. It gives life to, let's say, the clothing. I use a wash of Army Painter mini paints. Speed paints are really good. They give kind of overall feel to the piece, which is another kind of holy grail of mine when it comes to art, is to try and make something that feels cohesive or has a kind of life to it. So all of this is coated in a layer of I think the color is called Sand Golem. It gives it a kind of warm feel. With the skin, that's the most success I've ever had with paint, is a mix of, the color is Crusader skin, and I used a little bit of red on the eyelids, nose, and cheeks, and slight brown and red mix on the lips, and red on the ears to try and give a really kind of rosy cheek look, make him look alive, which really worked. This is the most success I've had with any sculpture looking real. So I'm proud of that one. And if you're trying to make something that looks real, then the only advice I can give you is vary the textures, because you don't, if your goal is that, then you don't want something that looks like it's all made out of clay. You want something that feels like it's made out of hair, and it's made out of bone and muscle and fabric and things like that. So I hope that helped. If you like this video, you enjoyed it at all, please leave a like and subscribe. That would mean a lot. And let me know if there's any other character you're interested in seeing, or if you want any kind of advice on sculpture.